space that's in between politics as usual and civil war. And this era of violent populism, I'm sorry to say, we're firmly now in the grip of it, and it's not going away anytime soon.
You know, Professor, and thank you for that. I heard a lot of people say things like we're headed toward a civil war, and I've never heard someone make a bridge, and you call it violent populism. So we're not necessarily at civil war temperature, but we're heading in that direction, and violent populism is what you say is I guess you could say the step before we would potentially get there. But if we do, what does that actually look like?
Well, civil war, the reason we're nowhere really close to civil war is because the kind of thing you see in the movies. We have battle after battle. We have different movies. We have books now coming out. These are things I've studied very, very closely for decades. I've studied them in Bosnia, the former Yugoslavia in the 1990s, Iraq, Afghanistan, many other countries, our own Civil War, 1860 to 65. What you see, Richard, that you really don't see here today is the Army and the security forces literally breaking apart. And that's where the real threshold is. Now, I think I have studied U.S. military veterans and their support for political violence, so I'm not speaking just carelessly about this. We do see them more involved in political violence, U.S. military vets, but the fact of the matter is we are not really seeing any signs that we are on the edge of the actual security forces breaking apart and taking sides. That would be a major step. This would be something you and I would be having a very different conversation if that were happening. And we're really not close to that. And I think to carelessly use these extreme terms is a bit like Chicken Little with the sky falling. It actually causes people to just this is all background white noise and ignore it. And then we don't actually deal with the issues where we have assassination attempts on both sides of the aisle. I mean, these are really quite serious. And possibility of mobs overturning election results, these are quite serious. So we don't have to have the formal civil war before we have a real danger to our democracy.
And that's in front of us right now. The dangers are here because so many people, I think, feel lost and disconnected, and then they're acting on the worst parts of them. Certainly not the better angels, but the quote unquote worse angels.
What's happening, Richard, is we are going through an extraordinary era of social change. There's really a couple that we're going through. The first big social change is we're transitioning from a white majority democracy to a white minority democracy. In 1990, we were 76% non-Hispanic white as a population. Today, we're 57%. In about 10 years, we'll be 49%. This is just creating enormous convulsions in our politics, because this really will change who wins elections, the winners, political winners and losers in the country. And you see there's some folks on the right quite dedicated. They want to stop this change. I mean, deport millions of people to stop this change. And then you see on the left, there are people really worried, well, wait a minute, this change is morally right. It should happen, and we don't want to stop it. Well, they want to keep it going. So you end up with not everybody in the country upset, but you get quite a change and shock to our politics and radicalization of our politics. Now, you throw on top of that in the last 30 years, on top of the demographic change, we've been pouring wealth from the bottom 90% of the country to the top 1%. This is also like a historic change. We haven't done this in the last 150 years. For 30 years, we have not just had a top 1% and upper class here. We've been pouring huge fractions of our country's wealth to the top 1%, and social mobility has virtually come to a halt. It's almost impossible now to get into the top 1% because they're using their wealth to keep it. And this is happening also on both sides of the party. So what you put together, you put this cocktail together, you end up with, if this was any other country, Richard, we would be truly studying political violence as a fact that's coming from social change. And the fact is, we're just not used to it in the United States, but we're not immune. We have no special DNA as Americans that we can go through these gigantic social changes and nothing's going to happen. A lot is happening, and these changes will go on for 10 years. We can do something about them, especially we can do something about stopping all the wealth going to the top 1%. But we as parties have to get together to do that. That's not going to be solved because a Democrat's in office or Republicans in office. Both sides have been feeding their donors here. And so we really need to have a serious conversation now about these changes. Otherwise, we're just going to have more and more political violence that rocks our country.
Yeah, I mean it's sobering to hear that, but very much on point. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina. I'm Richard Chu, and we are talking with Professor Robert Pape, professor of political science at the University of Chicago, specializing in international security affairs, but really giving us a quick, edited version of things that he's seeing and are happening real time here in the United States. I wrote down two things, Professor Pape, that you spoke about. One of them in reverse order was money, quote, money in not only in politics, but the donor class on both sides of the aisle, let's be honest. But also, I mean, and this is where Citizens United has really kind of screwed us over. But to that end, money in politics and wealth being sucked from the bottom and positioned and then protected at the top. Consolidation of wealth, consolidation of information, consolidation of resources is really allowing that 1% to protect itself from any attack, if you will, from the other 99%. The more that they gobble up, the more protection that they have. But the other thing that is clear is when you listed the attacks that have taken place in the last 7-8 years specifically, each one of those attacks had a unique thing about them, and that was either race, culture, or sexual identity. And it says to me something that you have spoken about, and that is the decline of the quote-unquote white population in America is a real thing, and that reality is pushing a hot conversation and causing certainly more violence. I know that may seem like a very basic question, but why is that?
It's happening, Richard, because as we're going through this giant demographic change, the political causes we care so much about, who's really going to govern the country? Is it going to be the continuation of a white-dominated political class, even as whites become a minority? Is it going to become a continuation of these traditional Americans, they like to call themselves, versus a new multicultural future for America? So these are the core issues, and you're putting your finger right on them as you're seeing how closely identified these issues are to the violence themselves, the actual attacks. Well, what's happening is these are the kind of issues that really get people angry. They are not simply far away from us. These are not issues that are on the fringe of society. These are on fringe, right at the mainstream and heart of what we think we are as Americans, the kind of America we will have for ourselves, our children, our communities, our families, our friends. And these are exactly the issues that can get pretty serious political support inside the body politic. And we conduct these big national surveys at our University of Chicago project on security and threats. And these big national surveys tell us that a third of Republicans are supporting political violence for causes they hold dear, and a third of Democrats are supporting political violence for causes they hold dear. And this is not something that has always been with us, even in our own surveys. These numbers have risen tremendously in the last 18 months. And so what you're really seeing is these are not issues that are far away and that people don't really care about. These are the issues that are right at the heart of what we think we live for. And what you're seeing is, unfortunately, now on both sides of the aisle, we're getting serious political violence, and we need to talk about this in a very direct way, because left to its own devices, this may not reach to civil war with two armies going toe to toe, but this can lead to real problems with elections again. It's just because we haven't had a January 6th in a few years. Remember, that was unprecedented before that happened. And we're about to go into the midterms here a year from now with some pretty serious, contentious issues, and I'm really quite concerned already, even though that's a year away, that we may be heading into more violence in 2026 than we're really expecting.
I'm already there. I've been there for months now. I honestly said this, I believe it was back in the late spring, early summer, that what we were about to see, it's not that it's unprecedented and we've never seen it before, but once we start to get into the wheels of motion for the midterms and what was at stake, we were going to see more of this. And that's why I've been saying for the longest time, Professor, we have to be, and again, I'm taking this from a progressive Democratic position, we've got to be winning elections and changing baseline things now. And I was saying this 6 or 8 months ago. We can't wait for the midterms, because by doing that, we stay away from having the conversations that you just talked about. One of them is
well, there's one thing, just before we move off from that, Richard, there's one thing we should do, and this will really be meaningful to people in Chicago, is we need to talk about right now having a moratorium on any ICE or federal militarized agents in the city and suburbs of Chicago in the months surrounding the November 26 midterms.
Yep. Agreed.
We just saw yesterday, ICE Bovino's
back. Yeah.
Yes. And what this is doing, and we have done surveys, by the way, Richard, we haven't talked about them, of the city of Chicago. So we know citizens in Chicago are really quite fearful this is going to upend the elections here, and who's going to, and whether they'll be free and fair. Well, we can do something about that now, Richard. We can already be building a movement to say, and talk to Governor Pritzker to have him articulate that we understand there's going to be an issue here with ICE. We understand we can't fully control things. The courts are going to be involved, but we need to draw a line. We need to say from October 1, 2026, at least through the certification of the election, say first week in January 2027, no federal militarized agents in liberal cities. And that is especially important in Chicago since we're the prime target. So we can identify this now. We don't have to wait until next fall. We should already be talking about this, because otherwise we're really asking for more and more trouble.
Well, I will tell you this. This is going to be my contribution to that conversation within the next 24 to 36 hours. Tomorrow, I will have Congresswoman Robin Kelly on the show and Mayor Brandon Johnson, and I will let them know that is a sentiment that's coming from.
And I would be glad to help follow this up. This is really critical. We have the time, Richard, to use the time well between now and the fall of 2026. I realize they have so much on their plate, but this is going to be a crucial midterm, and this one act of a moratorium, 3 solid month moratorium, this is something, if we start now, we may actually be able to get it.
Well, that's why, going back to, and I think this was probably what inspired you to remind me of this, I said this months ago that we have to take we have to take the position we're going to talk about these things and start coming up with the plans rather than just waiting for the midterms. We got to get involved in local elections now and special elections now. Same thing applies. We start early. We're not rushing. We cover all the bases when it comes to the moratorium. So I will definitely make sure to mention that to both Mayor Johnson and to Congresswoman Kelly on tomorrow's broadcast. Professor Pape, listen, time always runs out when I'm talking to someone like you, and it always puts a smile on my face because it puts me in the glorious position to ask you to find it in yourself to make it back on our show sometime after we get into the new year, because of the manner in which you've talked about so many important things this morning. So that's going to be my first ask, is that we get you back on.
And I'm glad to do it, Richard. This is a crucial time for our country, and I really appreciate all the good things you do with your show.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. One of the things that I want to do in this last couple of minutes, you were part of a really impactful presentation recently here in Chicago called The World of Flame, How Executive Power is Reshaping the World and Responding to Domestic Instability. Take a little bit, we only got a couple minutes left, but just take a quick moment to talk about what that gathering was all about.
What that was all about with the Federalist Society, which is a very conservative group, by the way, I speak to all different groups, was to really have a serious conversation about not just the centralization of executive power, which, of course, progressives, Rachel Maddow talks about just about every week, but how this is being married now to political violence. And this is very important. I don't believe we're just going to sleepwalk into authoritarianism. I'm sorry. I know that's common. I think political violence, though, linked to the centralization of presidential power, that's a different story. And that's what we need to focus on. And that's what's happening as President Trump is centralizing political power. He is essentially militarizing operations in the city of Chicago, we know, using Blackhawks, of all things. These are militarized helicopters to attack apartment buildings. And so this is really extremely concerning. And this is what I think we need to focus on. And this is, by the way, the Federalist Society, which you might think, oh, my gosh, shouldn't they just be, sort of a knee-jerk rubber stamping all this? This is a serious conversation now because combining centralized presidential authority with pretty indiscriminate use of political power for the president's personal causes, that's a different conversation. And that's what I meant, Richard, by the hard conversations we need to have. And I think that, yes, I'm not mean to say there's no concern that we could move into authoritarianism, but it's the political violence part that will make this irreversible. That's the part that we can't just get out of. And that's why I really want to focus like a laser light on the joining of the centralization of presidential power with this use of force for the political causes of Trump, of MAGA. And I would say, by the way, if it were happening on the other side of the aisle, I would complain about that too.
Absolutely.
But this is the problem. You see, it's this joining at the hip of centralization of presidential power and political violence for partisan purposes. Now we're in a different conversation, and I think this is something that we really need to highlight, and I think we'll get further because I believe I've done many focus groups. I speak to many groups around the country. I was in L.A. talking to Democrats. I was in Mississippi talking to Republicans here, and I believe it is not really true that we can't have a serious conversation across the aisle. We need to focus, though, on the things that would truly wreck our democracy. And I think once we do, we can really make some progress.
And you're so on point with that, and that's why I'm saying with the time that runs out, we've got to have Professor Robert Pape back from the University of Chicago. Thank you so much for hanging out with us and giving us your observations. Professor, we will have you back when we get into the new year. Thank you for taking some time this morning to talk about these very important things. We appreciate you this morning.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Bye now. We'll talk soon. Mike, let's take a quick break. 773-763-9278. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT, AM 820 in Chicago, and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina. I'm Richard Chu. We'll be right back.
Check Up on Health with Chris Whitting.
The leading cause of blindness over the age of 50 is macular degeneration. And Dr. Mark Blumenkrantz of Stanford University says until recently, it was nearly impossible to treat.
There's been an exciting development called photodynamic therapy or Visiodyn therapy. This is a process in which a dye is injected, then it's activated by a very low-intensity laser in the eye, and this produces a photochemical effect which causes these new leaking blood vessels to stop leaking, at least temporarily. The fluid that builds up in the back of the eye dries up, and the vision can be stabilized or, in some cases, improved. Certainly, at the very least, it slows down the rate of vision loss in persons compared with those that are not receiving any treatment or other forms of treatment.
Dr. Blumenkrantz says having a regular checkup with your ophthalmologist is the best way to catch macular degeneration early. With Checkup on Health, I'm Chris Whitting.
Volunteering is an opportunity to make a huge difference.
I'm a part of the solution.
Do you want to make a difference? If you volunteer, you can. Making a difference for you, your community, and your country. Join America's Volunteers.
This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
My name is Ruth Rusi. I volunteer with United Way, reading to children to help prepare them for a better academic future. I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer, Live United. Go to liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
You're listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter.
WCPT from TuneIn.
To the president saying we'll be launching primary challenges against every last traitor, his words, who voted no, effective immediately. You're a Republican. Your colleagues on your side of the aisle who voted against this, do you want them primaried?
Yeah, I think we need to start going down that path. Listen, I've been, talking to people all over Indiana for years. I've been in the political world. I've been a delegate myself since 2016 at the conventions, the grassroots. I know that world well. And for years, the Senate has been known as the place where conservative bills from the Indiana House go to die. And so this isn't the first time that we've seen a weak Senate. This isn't the first time that we've seen something like this happen where conservatives are shaking their heads saying, what is happening to the Senate? Now it's just on national display. And so we welcome that. We welcome Donald Trump Jr. to come in, and we're going to find some really good America First candidates to run in this next primary season.
Well, what can I tell you? That was the Lieutenant Governor, the Lieutenant Governor, Micah Beckwith, being upset that some Republicans said, I don't know. And so now Trump wants to, quote unquote, primary them and wave his, magic primary and redistricting, wishes. There's a guy that hangs out with us on Wednesdays. His name is Kurt Mullett from Hoosier Blue 63. That might have a few things to say about that. Good morning, Kurt, and welcome to the show.
Good morning, Richard. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. This is it's one of the clips that we have over at Heartland Signal, and I thought, you know what? I know that we haven't talked since last week's vote, because I think it happened on Thursday, but I figured, we got a lot to talk about, but let's dive in on this one. You guys got it right, and you've been pushing for this for months now to see this kind of, this kind of thing happen, but you got it right. And but Micah still he's still living in his crazy world. Talk about that if you can.
Well, we've known in Indiana for a long time that Micah Beckwith is crazy. It's just now he's getting some national exposure, and people are going, "Whoa, who's this guy?" Well, we've known for a long time. I mean, this guy is. I've been telling myself before I come on, just keep it clean. Don't. It's just hard to talk about him without just going off the charts with this dude. He is just unbelievable. The things that have come out of his mouth in the past about, the 3/5 compromise and how it was a good thing, and that, God spoke to him the day after January 6th and told him that he was the one that sent those warriors there. And just his rhetoric has just been off the charts for a long time. So to us around here in Indiana, it's not surprising what's coming from his mouth. But, he's doing the same thing that Republicans do over and over again. That happened, that led up to January 6th. They speak with words that incite violence. He put out a tweet that went down this path of disloyalty and dishonor, and then he, spent part of it praising, his orange Jesus about all his achievements since he's been into office. But he talked about, fighting, and the war has been started, and, the Marxist movement was chosen. He uses all of these words that incite violence from people on the right. And we know this, okay? We know where this violence comes from and how it's incited. It's the words they use. You can't tell a radical right-wing extremist who's in a MAGA cult that words like dishonor and disloyalty and fight and them not be incited to do something. It was proven leading up to this vote because there were many Republicans in our state that were swatted and were threatened. And who were they threatened by? They weren't threatened by Democrats. Just like the rhetoric that's out there that Democrats are the ones that created January 6th. I mean, come on. How ridiculous are people when they say things like this?
Well, here's what I'll add to this.
Republicans.
Here's what I'll add to this, and this is why, when I have a person on as a guest first time, I want to give them an opportunity to talk about things that they specialize in, or that they know, or that they're experts in, whatever. And the previous guest that we had on, Professor Pape, talked about where we are when it comes to violence in the country, and what he sees is some of the causes for it, and some of the where we're going to potentially go. One of the things that I didn't get a chance to really dig in deeper with him on in this short amount of time is the impact of racism and sexism and bias, or those are the templates that the Republican Party is operating off of right now. I complimented Chip Roy for speaking the truth, but I'm not giving the guy a bear hug. I'm just saying he's saying the truth about his party in terms of the garbage legislation that they're bringing forward. The vote in Indiana, the reason I played that clip from Matt Pierce, Representative Pierce, yeah, I mean, they got it right, and that's to be acknowledged. But at the end of the day, the baseline of all of this, and you've said in part last week when we talked about the map, It's built out of racism. It's built out of sexism. It's built out of bias. It's built out of this old years, decades, centuries need to keep, candidly, white folks in power. It's that simple. It's not any more complicated than that. I like to give people some room to talk about it to see their perspective. But if there's one thing that the professor and I will talk about when I have him back on is how deeply racism has impacted the decisions that the Republican Party were making. And redistricting is at the core of it because it is designed to take away the voting power of anybody other than folks that are not white and male. And in some cases, they could give a rat's behind if they're straight or not. But if it's a white male that's going to be able to have the vote, that's what this Republican Party, up and down, local, on a state level, and on a national level, are all about. That's really what I see, because what other reason would there be for this kind of nonsense? Same thing when it comes to the Affordable Care Act and what Roy was trying to talk about in terms of garbage policy. It's about keeping people who are brown skinned and others away from care. So I get it. For those who don't think I get it, I get it. And I know you do too, Kurt, to your extent, that this is all ultimately based in racism and bigotry.
100%. I mean, haven't we been talking about that since we started talking from the very beginning, you and I?
Pretty much right out of the gate.
That's what it's all about. It has been, and we know that. Many of us understand that. They just put a different covering on it or dress in a different garment, but it all boils down to that. Look, good people do not support 47. Okay, period. I don't care. And if somebody wants to come at me and send you text about me, that's fine. Good people do not support this guy. Horrible people do. Racist people do. Bigots do. That's who this clan, that's who this regime, that's what this cult is all about. Period. End of story. There's no other. So everything that happens evolves around that. And it's all racist, hateful, violent rhetoric. They want to do away with anyone that is not white and a male and thinks like they do. They want to take away the voting rights of women. This is old news to us. We've talked about they want this to be taken back to colonial America. That's what the great again part of it is. That's what the MAGA great again thing is. And the parallels between, 1930s Germany and 40s Germany and what's happening now are unbelievable. It's astounding when you start digging into it and see those. But they'll deny that. They'll sit right there and say, "There's nothing comparison about." Bull crap. It's the same rhetoric and the same ideology. It's just different people. Instead of the Jews, it's the blacks, but it's still the LGBT. It's anyone who doesn't think like they do. So, and Micah is a perfect example of that. He is the most hateful, self-proclaimed Christian, minister that I've ever witnessed, in the state of Indiana for sure. Maybe not nationwide. I don't know. I tried to avoid all those. But, we have a Republican in state, Chris Gardner, that got up there, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen it, and screamed at the assembly saying, along the lines of some will say these maps are political, and then he slammed down the counter and he said, "Let me be clear, they are right. They are political." I mean, so do we need to hear anything else?
Yeah, I know, man.
He said it right there. Come on. So,
well, listen, this is the reality of where we are right now, and maybe I do have a magic wand.
Sorry, I'm ranting.
No. I mean, I think that the beauty of our conversations is that many people need to want to rant, need to talk about what's going on, what's affecting them, what pains them, and what they're worried about. And so, we try to do that as best we can with our show. This is not a straight line to success. This is a line that meanders. And oftentimes, I think what happens is, even to our listeners, the expectation sometimes that we're going to get it right 100% of the time, and that's foolishness. And so to have a conversation that is sometimes ranting, and then a conversation that is sometimes, very linear with bullet point accuracy, is part of the process. One of the things that we can't do, though, and I've said this for the longest time, if we waste time cutting each other's knees out, then we lose. Okay, and a lot of people get defensive when this is what happens, Kurt. People call out what somebody else says, but when you push back on what they say, even those on our side, then they get ticked off because you push back. Do you know what I mean? And I know you experience this given the fact that you're in Indiana, red state, that people, that, the conservative Democrats there, when you say certain things as a much more true liberal Democrat, and then they criticize you for saying it, it's like you should just take their criticism and not push back on it. Well, hell no. You're going to push back on it because you see, just because they have a D by their name doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to roll up their sleeves and get bloody and fight. And that's kind of why I think sometimes we have to be careful in our own party of not listening to our own kind of pushback. Because a lot of times people will say certain things and we have to push back on it in real time. And sometimes people say certain things and we got to think about it and then determine how are we going to approach that when we talk to folks. And it includes all of that. And that's one of the things that I'm very committed to, is that we have to We have to be willing to do that, to have conversations that are going to get us from A to B to C to Z. And I think you've really mastered that ability, is to say, I'm going to listen to what people have to say, and I'm going to listen to the criticism, I'm going to take the hits, but I'm going to punch back too. And I may not punch back immediately, but at some point I'm going to punch back. And I'm all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get it right all the time. I mean, I'm the first to admit that there are times when I need to keep my mouth shut. I mean, that's one of the problems I've had my entire life, that I've been opinionated, and I will speak up when I feel like there's a voice that needs to be heard. But for a long time, I didn't say anything. A lot of us were that way. We just listened and we observed, and it didn't do any good. We allowed this to get to the point where it was. This is, I put this as much blame on us as anybody. It's our fault for not doing our jobs of fighting back. We knew what was coming down the road, and we didn't speak loud enough, or we didn't do the right thing. Or maybe I shouldn't blame us, but I'm just saying I take a lot of the responsibility, and I feel like if there's anything that I can do in my life, in my golden years, is to stand up and fight for this democracy that we're seeing being stripped away from us. And am I doing the right things? I don't know if I am or not, but I'm not going to sit back and allow people just to banter or just to, attack us and stay with their rhetoric and not push back on it. Should I keep my mouth quiet sometimes? Yes, I should. Should I be less critical about certain people? Yes, I should sometimes. I'm sorry if I don't do the right thing all the time, but I'm going to do something.
That's right.
That's where I stand. And, if people don't like it, that's tough. And I understand. I upset a lot of people, especially around here. If I could share my instant messages with people, you'd be appalled by what I get from people.
No, I wouldn't be.
It's amazing what people say to me. I mean, I get threats all the time.
Yeah.
I had a neighbor the other day talk about my little dogs because of what I put on social media, okay? I mean, people are crazy. And right now with what's going on with the ACA, they don't understand what's going on. They don't understand what's happening with health insurance, and they're going to find out real quick what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago, WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina. I'm Richard Chu. We're talking to our good friend Kurt Mullett from Hoosier Blue 63. As always, Kurt and I are chopping it up and missing the mark, but still firing away because we are in this fight to win. One of the things that I've learned from talking with Mayor Johnson and other elected officials, one of the things that I've learned is this: if people's intent to do good and to do things right and to make things better, that's clearly who he is, and that's clearly who so many of our other folks that have been elected who are Democrats are trying to do. They aren't going to get it right 100% of the time. Our guests on this show and other shows aren't going to be right 100% of the time. But what I would rather have, Kurt, is someone that I believe is fighting for us to improve and get better than the nitpicking that comes sometimes from our side, that purity test, that it's got to be right, they got to be perfect all the time. And if they don't say everything just right at the moment that you hear it, then suddenly we spend more of our time criticizing that than we do fighting against the people who are actually firing howitzers at us. And it's it's a mistake that we keep making. And so when it happens sometimes, I ask myself, is that person really down with us, or are they actually, and I'm going to say this, they're softly trying to pull us apart. And I ask that question because I know you experienced that in Indiana because of the predominance of red that's there, but also some Democrats that sometimes need to stop the infighting. So I look at Mayor Johnson, I look at Governor Pritzker and Gavin and Moore and all the rest that I mentioned, and I say, I don't think that those folks have anything in their system to do anything other than to help. If they get it wrong sometimes, or they don't get it right, then help them, get better, but don't just outright, slam and criticize as people. That's sometimes how I see it, Kurt. I think you know that by now.
Mayor Johnson has said that many a times. I do not get it right all the time. I've heard him. I've heard those words come out of his mouth many times. Every great leader is going to admit that. Every great human being is going to admit that. If you understand that you are not perfect and that you are going to get it wrong, and that you will be wrong, and that you're human, and that those qualities are who you are and who all of us are, that no one is right all the time. That's what differentiates you from a person who thinks that he's right all the time. And who is that? That's the dude sitting in the White House. And he has actually said those words. So this is where the fight is, and this is where, the struggle comes. We're coming from a place that we know we're not doing it right, but we're going to do something. We're going against those who think they do everything right. And it's a battle. And we struggle with that here in Indiana, not only with our Republicans. I mean, I'm thankful for the 21 Republicans that voted against gerrymandering. I think they realized that, the pressure that Democrats were putting on them, okay, because we showed up in numbers. Our protests and our voices were loud here in Indiana. We were there at the state house every day protesting this. They heard us. They seen what we were doing. And they understand that there's a change happening not only in the state but in the country. They're paying attention to the elections that are happening all around the United States. And it seems like every special election, Democrats are winning. And they're not just winning. They are winning soundly.
Yeah.
And did we lose in Tennessee? Yeah, we did. But there was a huge swing in points in an area that is predominantly,
did you hear?
And
Kurt, did you hear this? And I'm drawing a blank. One of our guests last week, Nathan Taylor, that talks about election shenanigans. He even said, and they're looking at some of the numbers now, that there may have been some shenanigans that went down in this election, that special election in Tennessee. Doesn't know the answer, but he's looking into it because there were some oddities that did not match up with what the data was showing them going into the election. So, there's that component as well. But to your point, that was a massive swing in terms of what the Trump numbers were versus what the state numbers were in that election. And to your point, there's a lot, and let me come back to this because you touched on it briefly, but what's happening in terms of how corporate media is covering these successes is also once again part of the problem, because their approach to this is that they're steady trying to find out, well, how is this happening? Where is this coming from? And this sort of breathless, they don't understand. Well, doggone it, the reason it's happening is because the dude in the White House is got a lot of people ticked off, angry, frustrated, and they are saying, the voters are saying, okay, we got it wrong. All right, you got it wrong, so do something about it. And the corporate media, they're not handling this particularly well because they know that that's also kind of a disowning of them, because they were so behind what this guy and his party have represented for the last decade. What are your thoughts about that?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, my feelings on mainstream media. I think I understand that that's a source that so many people rely on, but I encourage people to turn it off. And yes, there are respectable journalists out there, but you got to realize they work for Republicans. They work for conservative. That's who owns the media. Okay, media is not owned by liberals. It's owned by conservatives, and they have a limit on what they're going to be allowed to put out onto the network. So it's going on 2 years now that I haven't watched network news, and I don't. So I get the snippets that I see on social media that are shared. And like I said, there are some people that I respect. But for the most part, I rely on those people who were in that arena at one time that are now on separate platforms like YouTube and Substack and other areas that I can watch, like Katie Fang and Joy Reid. Don't you
just love some? Let's just give some shout outs real quick to. It just goes to show how powerful their voices were and still are. Katie Fang, Joy Reid. What's the dude's name with CNN? Don Lemon.
I'm drawing a blank right now.
So those three right there: Don Lemon, Katie Fang, Joy Reid, and the other guy that would always stand up at the White House press briefings, and I can't think of his name right now, but you know who I'm talking about, and somebody will probably send me a text to remind us. But they are on fire. They have been, and they've been so creative about the stuff that they've been doing. And so to that end, it does speak to the fact that they were right in what they were saying and their positions. And they got called out. They didn't get called out. They got fired because they spoke the truth. Guess what, Kurt?
Right.
They're still speaking the truth. It hasn't changed.
Exactly.
They're just unhinged,
No.
which goes to show you. And so for those of you who are listening anywhere in the country, let me just share this with you. When I take the approach with someone that I want to be respectful and kind and in interviewing someone, and they say something that I don't fully agree with, sometimes I've got to let them say it and then come back and deal with it because I don't miss it. But I've got to approach it in a way that there's still some continuity. And Mike's nodding because he knows exactly what I'm talking about. But to that end, let me help everybody understand this. And let me be really clear about this. For those who have come to know me on this show, in any capacity, if I went scorched earth about what I really believe, not what I really believe, because what I really believe is what I really, but if I, on the air, went scorched earth about the things that I see in this country, as a man, a black man in this country, I wouldn't be on the next day. Okay? So anybody that thinks for a minute that I don't get it and then I don't feel, see, hear, my head's on a swivel 24/7. My head's on a swivel when I sleep. But I can't say everything about what everybody says when they come on this show, because if I did, I wouldn't be on the next day. I can promise you that. So my job is to bring in as much as I can to fill the void as much as I can, and bring on my man Kurt, bring on my road dog Karen and Sarah and all the rest, so that we can fill in what as much as we can that the folks in corporate media aren't doing. And so please hear that, y'all. Anywhere in the country where you said, God, Chew didn't get that. Why did he let that slip by? It ain't that I let it slip by. It's for continuity purposes, and because if I said what I was really thinking, y'all wouldn't hear from me again on this show. So please get that. And Kurt, you can take the baton from me on that one.
I feel like most of the time, not all the time, most of the time when people say you just don't get it, it's because they don't get it. That's what they're actually saying to you. You don't get it. Well, no, they're saying I don't get it. And so, how dare you act like you know what you're talking about. So, and I know we're getting to the end, but one of the things about these elections and that they're coming, what I encourage, what we're trying to do here in Indiana with some groups that I'm involved in, is getting people involved. Republicans have done a great job over the years of becoming precinct chairs and poll booth workers and being involved in the political end of voting. And that's what Democrats need to do. We can eliminate a lot of the shenanigans if we make sure that we have Democrats sitting there at the polling tables and at the precincts and our precinct chairs, along with the Republicans that are doing that kind of a job. That's how we fight against this. It starts at the grassroots. And Michael Beckwith uses this term grassroots all the time. He is the furthest thing from grassroots. These people use words like Marxism and grassroots. He has no idea what they are. He's a Marxist. and he is not a grassroots candidate. And we've got a dude that's running for the Democratic candidacy right now in Indiana for Secretary of State that keeps using the word grassroots, but has now accumulated over $1.3 million in donations. So these people do not have an understanding of what grassroots means. But this is how we get involved to make sure that shenanigans do not happen in our voting system. And, you know, I mean, it starts with us. It starts with your neighbor and the guy across the street and the lady that's sitting next door having a cup of coffee on her front porch. That's where we start this fight, and that's where it all begins.
And everybody,
once we can.
I would say that so many people agree with that, and the results of these elections is showing itself. Whether it's Caitlin Dray in Iowa and others that we've had on in different states and locations, that they've all said a similar thing. It's going to where the people are. It starts with that basic, knocking on the door. We had on another candidate in Ohio who spoke to Renee Hardman, said the same thing. She's knocking on doors on a cold, freezing day in Iowa, and the people are shocked that she's doing it. But that's because she's committed to the work, and she wants to get things done and make changes for the people in the state of Iowa. And that's for a state election. That's not for a federal election. So it starts right there at home. It starts with what you've been doing so well, my friend. And I'm so proud of what you continue to fight and do in Indiana. And listen, Kurt, you need to hear this. You are one of those people that are at the front of the line moving the ball down the field. And I'm going to say that, and I know you aren't going to take it, and I know you well enough now. You have been one of those people that has been speaking loudly to this, and it's your voice and voices like yours that had an impact on this redistricting vote last week. Whether you want to accept that or not is your business, but that's the stone cold truth. Now deal with that.
Well, hey, I'll deal with it. I appreciate it. You've been a great friend, and I appreciate everything you do. Look, I'm a 62-year-old dude in rural Indiana. I just do what I can, and if I can change one opinion on the situation that's happening in our country right now, it's all worth it. So
cool.
But thank you. Yeah.
Well, good. Well, I'm gonna get you out of here because Mike's looking at me like, "Chew, we got to go to a break." Good to have you with us, man, as always. Kurt Mullett from Hoosier Blues 63. As always, it's Wednesday, and it's lovely to have you with us, my man. Be safe. We'll talk to you next week.
All right. Take care of yourself. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. You're listening to Chew's Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina. I am Richard Chew. We'll be right back.
You're listening to WCPT 820. Here's the latest Chicago weather update.
From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Jennifer Wojcicki. We'll see mostly sunny skies here for today with a high in the mid-40s. Winds out of the west around 5 to 10 miles per hour, gusting as high as 15. Then for tonight, we'll see a chance for rain showers here late. Increasing cloud cover, temperatures fall early, then slowly rise overnight. By Thursday, a chance for some rain, cloudy skies, temperatures climb early, then slowly fall throughout the day. That's your latest Chicago weather update. Currently, it's 34.
Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter. Because facts matter. You're listening to WCPT 820.
Good morning. You're waking up with Richard Chew.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
We're live and ready to hear from you. Text or call us now at 773-763-9278. Same number. Simple as that. Let's get the conversation going on Chew's Views.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. Listen, both sides do it is not a thing with me. For those who've hit me with some text this morning, I am not a both sides do it. I know that's not correct or applicable. There are things that both sides do, but in this crazy time right now, the people that are causing the harm and the chaos. Let me state this clearly so that you will hear it, so that you don't think that I forgot anybody anywhere in the country that's listening. Both sides are not doing the harm. The Republicans are doing the harm. We know that. And that's why we speak to it as best we can all the time. Republicans are the ones that are doing the harm. So when I opened the show talking about what the folks in Indiana did last week with the vote, and the clip that we played from our State Representative Matt Pierce, it's to highlight the fact that Republicans, whether they got it right or wrong is maybe how one labels it, they did the thing that was right for the state because they know that what's out there is crazy. And if it weren't crazy and if they didn't know it, then they wouldn't be, on the tip of the spear from Lieutenant Governor Beckwith and Trump when it comes to primarying them. They're not primarying them because they need to go from a political stand. They're primarying them because they didn't kiss Donald's behind. That's what happened. And I will tell you that in any state on any issue where that's the case, that's going to happen again. And that proves that both sides don't do it. Republicans are the ones that are causing the harm and the chaos. One of the things that Republicans have stood in the way of is something that our next guest has had to deal with, and that happens to be gun violence. She's a mayor of a town that's near and dear to my heart and so many folks here in Chicago, and had to deal with one of the most, heartbreaking tragedies a couple of years ago, and that was the mass shooting that took place in Highland Park. So who am I speaking of? I'm speaking of the wonderful, wonderful, truly effective, and I love to use that word, mayor of the great town of Highland Park, Illinois, Mayor Nancy Rotering. Good morning, Mayor Rotering, and welcome to Choose Views on WCPT.
Good morning, Richard. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. I won't ask how you're doing because I know you're probably today, if you stepped outside, you're going, thank God it's not 9 degrees. It's 37 degrees.
But the sun is out. The sun is out, so we'll take it.
I'm telling you, how many times, we have such a low bar, but I don't mean that in a negative way in Chicagoland area and the upper Midwest when it comes to the weather. The minute it jumps over 36 degrees, we're like, oh, thank goodness.
Right. It's the tropics. Take off your jacket. Don't be a wimp.
That's exactly right. I walked out to the car. My coat was wide open this morning. So I'm like, yeah. There we go. Mayor Rotering, thank you so much for being with us this morning. You have been such a, what's the word I want to use? You've been a champion at a time when your community, our community, has faced some really crazy situations. And, we unfortunately, the shooting made international news, if you will, and people from all over the world know a little bit about Highland Park because it's a suburb of Chicago. But I just want to compliment you on how you have sort of picked up the pieces in the community and done your best to move things forward and keep the community together. And that's something that I don't think gets applauded enough. And I know that you're probably going to respond with it was the community and the team, and it was, but leadership helps a lot. So thank you for that.
Well, I appreciate it, but I am going to say this is a really great community, and it's a place where everybody graduates high school and says, I'm never coming back, and then a few years later they bring their kids back and they're like, this is a great place to raise a family. And it's one of those things where even if you're new, even if you've been here for generations, people support one another, and they are really here for each other in good times and in bad. It's heartbreaking to see what's going on, what happened in Providence. Our heart goes out to those families, those students, that university, what happened on Bondi Beach. The violence brings everybody back to, unfortunately, that moment on July 4th. And so here we are again, sort of looking at one another and supporting one another, but also supporting other communities who are now facing the unthinkable. I spent literally a week with Mayor Brett Smiley of Providence 2 weeks ago. We were in New Orleans together for the Combating Anti-Semitism meeting. And, we got to know each other. And then to see him in that moment, I started texting him literally as soon as the news broke. Here's, how we moved forward, and here are some resources for mayors facing mass shooting events. There's a handbook, if you will, a digital handbook that's 198 pages long that helps mayors know what to do in the immediate aftermath and in the days to follow. So they are in the unfortunate situation, as far as I understand, that they're still looking for the shooter, which is horrible. I can't even imagine being in a community wondering who's out there and what their plans are to do next. So,
and that's for me, and I think for so many millions of Americans, having leaders like you come together and know that, unfortunately, this is something, Mayor Rotering, that can happen, that we've got to prepare for, that we've got to have a manual for it, it's just heartbreaking that we have to have it, but we do. And unfortunately, I was saying this earlier, right before you came on, and as part of your intro, we don't get it all right as progressive liberal Democrats, but we're not the ones that are trying to tear down the country or get in the way of legislation on a local level, on a state or a federal level, to move our country forward, to make things better for so many people. And
absolutely.
But it's sad that we have to have a manual, and I say we because we truly are all in this together. But the fact that you guys have come together to create it says that you understand the reality of where we are, and you are prepared to meet the moment, unfortunately, that may come to a community. So once again, I'm all about this, Mayor Rotering. I'm all about giving our leaders, because y'all catch hell. I'll just call it as it is.
Come on, Richard. It's always love and rainbows. It's interesting. I heard this said over and over again. Well, Providence has never experienced anything like this. Most communities do not experience this ever. And those that do shouldn't, right? I mean, it's one of those things where the vast majority of those who hit the news are those who have never experienced this. But we know that there are plenty of communities that unfortunately have regular gun violence. And that's a whole other piece to the conversation that sort of goes underreported and underdiscussed. And what kind of resources should be provided to communities that do have to deal with regular trauma coming out of mass violence. We have for years been talking with the federal government about how they provide resources for communities hit by tornadoes or, train derailments. Something horrible physical happens and immediately funds are provided. But communities that are facing regular violence are just left to deal with it. And even communities like Highland Park, and sadly it'll happen to Providence, don't have a lot to do in the aftermath without support. And that's something that people need to talk about more. We know the ripple effect that violence can have on creating more trauma, creating more violence. There's a whole sort of theory behind any community hit by mass violence will see an uptick in crime, whether it's domestic violence or homicides. We saw that here. Other communities have seen that as well. And so there's a real sort of, science, sadly, behind all of this. There's also a frustration that we at one point as a country banned these weapons of war for 10 years. Yep. And according to Giffords, the organization that works so strongly on gun violence prevention, Gabby Giffords, they saw a huge drop, obviously, in deaths related to mass gun violence when these weapons created for war were banned. So it's time to get back to that, for sure.
One of the things, and thank you for that, Mayor Rotering, you're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina. We're talking with the mayor of Highland Park, Nancy Rotering. I have to ask you this question. When it comes to the phrase that was used earlier this week with one of my guests was the disinvestment in communities. Mm-hmm. And you've been a big proponent of we need to fund everything. I'm putting words in your mouth. Those are my words. But you basically have said, I don't care what it is, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, whether it's supporting our LGBTQ community, whether it's fighting for women, folks of color, all the above, religion, we have to fund the education and the awareness around those things. Talk about why that's so important to you in your leadership right now.
Well, when you think about why does government exist, it sure doesn't exist for the enrichment of for-profit corporations. It's created to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public in an efficient manner. And if you kind of boil it all down to that, how do we get to that place? How do we find those efficiencies? I'm a University of Chicago grad. I'll talk all day about economic efficiencies. But when you're thinking about protecting the public, making sure that people have clean water and safe streets and clean air and the ability to live their lives, to pursue, growth for their families. When our grandparents were growing up, so to speak, they had that expectation that their children and their grandchildren would do better than them. And we're seeing, frankly, policies that are setting us back on our heels, things that are turning the clock back in a way that's not helpful to the greater good. I teach at Northwestern University Women in American Political Leadership, and I was with my students on the day that Roe versus Wade was overturned, and to look at their faces and to know the impact of what it must have felt like to hear that this one healthcare procedure that affects more than half the population at some point in their lives, potentially, was now being removed or diminished in terms of its accessibility. Why on earth would you turn the clock back? Why on earth would you remove rights from people? Why would you make it harder for people to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? It makes no sense, other than cruelty. So I kind of look at what's going on right now, and I try to talk to my own kids and my students and give them the sense that this isn't always how it has felt. And I feel terribly for this current generation of young adults who are looking at the future and going, where do I go from here? How does my voice get heard? So that's something that I think is important for all of us older folks to keep the hope alive and to let them know that there is a better way to move forward through government, through community service, and through engagement.
Without a doubt, Mayor Rotering, you and I grew up at the same time, came out of high school, went to college, did our thing, and we saw so much of what was happening in the late 60s and the 70s. We were raised and impacted by that, growing up here in the upper Midwest. And we saw those things and said, okay, I want to have an impact on that. And I can tell you, my reaction as a guy to Roe was personal because my older sister was elbows deep fighting for that as a young woman. And I remember the day after this, I sent her a text. I said, Linda, how are you feeling about this? And she said, I didn't think I was going to have to fight this fight again after all the work I put in when I was a young woman. So as I look at this and think about, the fire that you and I came through when we were coming along, and I think about our young folk now, I really want, and kind of my prayer for them, if you will, is to help inspire them to be change agents. Because so much of what, our generation, our age group, yours and mine, went through was about how can we affect change? How can we make things better? And one of the things that's clear about this, Mayor Rotering, is that the forces that are going to be on the other side of that impact are working really hard right now to disenfranchise our youth from being change agents. Do you know what I mean? They're working.
I absolutely do. I absolutely do. And it's one of those things where, to your point, we always have had sort of in our DNA, what can I do to make this world better? It's really just been sort of a motivating factor. There's a running joke in Highland Park that half of my high school graduating classes run for office. We don't know what it was that made the class of 79 feel like this is our duty, but half of us have run for office. And it's, how do I make the world better, not what's in it for me? And so if you think about how are communications getting into the minds of our young folks and telling them, it's all about getting attention or, what's in it for me, that's not the message that needs to get out there. I have very real concerns with folks who are eyes down into the screen, not looking up, not looking out into the world, being fed all kinds of nonsense, being told this is what matters. And we've seen this, if you look at what is political efficacy and how do people have that sense of my voice matters versus my voice doesn't matter, and does the government listen to me or the change agents, do they hear what I'm saying, or are they kind of diminishing me? That's really where the messaging needs to come from. So it's an interesting challenge. We in Highland Park, I have third graders come to City Hall, and we do mock city council meetings. I'm like, listen, if you can stand up and talk, I want to hear from you at the podium if you have something to say to the people who represent you. And then later on, when the kids are in high school, we put them on city commissions. Because, again, these are voices that I want elevated. I want them to know that it doesn't matter how old you are, what you do, what you look like, who you are, your voice needs to be heard. And so here's how you start. Here's how you get engaged civically. It's not a high step. You can just show up and you can be heard, and get in that habit of making sure that you're speaking out and speaking up and not just being told this is what you're going to believe.
Yeah, Mayor, I was just sitting here, as I say this so many times, when someone gets, as we say, when someone starts to preach, you listen. And so I put my pen down because I said, let me just embrace all of this. Because
can you call my kids, Richard, and let them know that it's worth listening to?
give them my number and say, your new Uncle Richard wants to chat with you for a minute. Got a couple of things you might want to, but no, Mayor, I really fully mean that when I say, this is where we are right now is really about, when you say what's in it for me, what's in it for me, what's in it for us is a better place.
Right.
And that, half of your class running for office and over the years of your education with, you've seen so many times when, and again, I'm putting words in your mouth, where you had to slow down and say, wait a minute, what can I do to impact this? And I've been talking about this in terms of local politics, local organization, local activity. We've got to keep pushing. We don't have to find a way. We know what the way is. And it is, we've got to keep pushing folks every day, encouraging them, when I say push, to get involved and stay involved. You may need to take a breath and a breather, but get involved. Because we've lost some space. We've lost some, I don't know what you say, political might, because we have been silent. We haven't taken on. Let's talk about race. Let's talk about religion. Let's talk about sex. Let's talk about economic issues. Because trust me, the others on the other side, and I don't like to use that negatively, but the folks that are in opposition to what we're trying to do, they're talking about it. And they've organized already. They're not organizing. They've already organized. We have to be willing, in my humble opinion, Mayor, to do that. And then you've definitely represented that in your leadership.
I appreciate that. It's interesting, the spaces that you mentioned, whether it was civic clubs or religious organizations or wherever the case may have been that people gathered in the past. Again, everybody's splintering. Everybody's doing their own thing, or they're looking at their screens, or they're not even getting outside and walking around and talking to their neighbors. And it's one of those things, too, where we now have a system that rewards people being angry at each other versus rewarding people coming together and maybe sharing their differences, but taking the time to hear that other person's point of view and trying to better understand how somebody who maybe lives next door can have such divergent views from your own, and better trying to understand it. There was something that I read recently where they said the answer to somebody you disagree with isn't, I disagree with you, but help me better understand why this is important to you, or help me better understand where this knowledge came from, and really give people sort of that breathing room to maybe disagree, but also find what are likely going to be, 80% of things that people do agree on, and then move forward from there. So I think we all need to kind of take a beat. It's maybe exciting and fun to argue and to be angry about the other side, but that's not going to move our city, our community, our country forward. The more we disagree and cover our ears, the more splintered we're going to become. I've spent the last 3 years working with an organization called the Strong Cities Network, and they're focused, it's a global organization, and they're focused on combating hate, polarization, extremism that lead to mass violence. You can imagine how they found me. So it's one of those things where, but we talk about community organizations and understanding folks who get isolated and understanding folks who feel so out of touch that they now have to turn to violence to make their voices heard. That's not a great path forward? How can we bring everybody back in, and how can we give them the ability to have that disagreement in a way that doesn't mean I'm coming for you, but more, how can I better understand people that really don't make sense to me or to you, and find that common ground. So our work's definitely cut out for us.
It is, and I know this may sound crazy to some, but I'm excited about the fact that the work is there to be done, because on the other side of that is progress. On the other side of that is the goal that we all say, the goal, GOLD, that we all say that we want, and that's to be in a better place. And, you know, I'm going to ask you this question as we wrap up. First of all, we're going to have you back in next year, so you can count on that, because the global issues are local to your community, and we want to make sure we get your voice as part of it. But Mayor Rotering, what would you say as a send off to folks that are listening all over about what you want to see folks be doing and involved in these weeks and months to come? What would be your, okay, guys, this is what we got to all be doing?
Oh, it's great. We're in the holiday season. Everyone's going to parties with people they haven't seen for over a year probably. Have that crazy conversation over Christmas dinner or a Hanukkah celebration and say, help me better understand. How did you get to that point? Don't look at it as, oh, crazy Uncle Joe is back and we're going to have to go in the corner and avoid him at all costs. These are, I mean, right now we have these built-in forums and opportunities for us to start to find common ground again. You know, families have their traditions, and there's a lot of angst right now. And do we invite, you know, Aunt Sue to dinner, or do we want to avoid that conversation? I say lean in with a full heart and two open ears, and see if you can find that common ground. If they don't want to have that conversation, then it's not worth trying, obviously. But I think as we move forward, we as communities need to build our resilience. And the only way you can build resilience is through building those common memories and having those conversations. So I think it's important to not protect, not defend, but really, I think, try to open your heart and see what you can achieve.
Yeah, the strength comes from the fight, not from not fighting, and that's my way of paraphrasing what you said. Her name is Mayor Nancy Rotering from the great city of her name is Nancy Rotering. She happens to be the mayor of the great city of Highland Park, Illinois, a suburb of northern Chicago. And it's been awesome having you with us. I look forward to having you back. Happy Hanukkah, happy Merry Christmas, and a super safe end of the year and going into 2026.
So appreciate you, Richard. Looking forward to talking again soon.
Stay safe, and we will talk to you soon, Mayor. Talk to you soon.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Yeah, man. I mean, that's it, Mike. That's what she said is how you got to get it done. We have to lean into this. Leaning away from it is what we've done way too long. And I will say I'm as guilty of it as anybody else, because, you know, it's human nature. We want to take a break. We want to, you know, turn off the noise and not feel like we're always, you know, engaged in something. And that's human nature. I mean, I will tell you, the best of our leaders, the Dr. Kings and the Malcolms and the Medgar Evers I mean, listen, you know, everybody that's been in the fight, of all communities, all shapes and sizes and skin tones and religions and all that, we all have to take a break. We all have to catch our breath. I mean, you run a marathon. When the marathon's over, you catch your breath. You run a sprint. When the sprint's over, you catch your breath. So, you know, we understand that. I'm just saying what my hope for all of us is that people will find a way to get engaged and take this the right way. That engagement, and if you don't take it from me, take it from Mayor Rotering. It may mean you kind of have to shed some of your layers of protection. And that may mean getting out and getting physically, and I don't mean physically engaging with someone like fisticuffs, because then me and Mike got to come rescue you. I mean, it may require for some of us that we've got to go to a meeting. We've got to go to a thing. We've got to see people. If we're going to have the change that she talked about in terms of getting our eyes up from the keyboards and the devices and all that, it's probably going to require that we get up and go to a meeting, that we get up and go to a thing and be a part of that physical engagement so that we can start to tear back some of these layers of comfort And I'm not poking fun or fingers at anybody. I'm myself. I said it earlier. I missed a meeting that I should have been at back in August. That's something that directly impacts my neighborhood. So I'm not. The three are pointing back at me as I point at you guys. But it's with love and care that that I talk about it this way. So let's be about it, guys. Let's do what we got to do. Let's stay engaged and be willing to do what the mayor said, and that's have those conversations with folks that may not necessarily always listen to us. Stay tuned for the Stephanie Miller Show, and remember, take a deep breath and make your life count. We'll see you tomorrow.
If you're purchasing a new home or refinancing your existing home, you need to call Team Hochberg, your trusted local lender. Suzanne called after hearing me explain discount points on my radio show because her son was purchasing a home in Colorado. I answered Suzanne's questions and encouraged her son to call me for a free consultation. Suzanne was so impressed with the service I provided, she wrote this 5-star Google review. Quote, I sent David an email today with a question about discount points that I heard him talk about on his radio show. And he called me back this evening with a complete explanation. I'm so impressed with his responsiveness and knowledge. Thank you, Suzanne, for the amazing review. I strongly encourage everyone to check out Team Hochberg's close to 600 5-star Google reviews. Team Hochberg helped Suzanne and thousands of radio listeners, but we can't help if you don't call 855-563-2843 or visit 56david.com. That's 855-563-2843 or visit 56david.com. Lower.com, equal housing lender, MLS 112-461.
Steel. Check off the wish list with instant savings and free battery offers on select Steel tools. Shop online